doing it again. We're recording new music for the next episode of Star Trek Continues, episode 5. Andy Farber is back, and he's written some amazing new music for our first episode off the ship. If you haven't heard, you probably soon will, that this is an episode that takes place much in the Civil War period.
Well, here we are again, scoring yet another episode of Star Trek Continues. In a way, this is actually kind of like the way they did the original programs, because sometimes they would use partial scores. So maybe 6 or 7 new scores were written every season, and then the rest of them were tracked together by the music editor. But when there was something very specific where you needed something new, as an example, all the Goodnight Sweetheart cues in City on the Edge of Forever, that was a tracked episode except for those cues. So today we're recording at a studio in Hoboken, New Jersey called Water Music, which is one of the last really good sounding rooms in the New York area. And fortunately it's big enough to fit 45, 50 musicians. It's quite the challenge to get 45 or 50 volunteer musicians who are also Star Trek fans together in one place. There are a lot of people that would love to do it that could not make it just because of scheduling, but we put together quite a nice group today. And we were privileged to have the great Harry Searing, one of the world's greatest bassoon players, who also happens to play the heckelphone, one of only 100 of these instruments in captivity. And I got a kick out of it because Alexander Courage used some heckelphone in the score to The Cage.
Well, like a lot of people, I've been a big Star Trek fan since I was a kid, but again, during that period when I was in my 20s, I became much more devoted to watching the program. So to play music that's right from the show or inspired by the show in Andy's arrangements is really quite a thrill.
So Pete and I were roommates back in the day, even before Next Generation premiered, so it was still just unknown whether it was going to come back to TV. So, you know, we were watching the show on our little black and white TV every night, and, you know, Star Trek. But Pete with the impersonations, that was the real.
Oh, let's hear it.
No. Okay, there's too much pizza to stole my thrill.
1, 2, 3.
You know, you're probably going to hear a theme in this episode that sounds like this. And you're probably going to think, if you're a connoisseur of the original series music, you're going to go, oh my gosh, I know that. That's the theme that Uhura sang in Charlie X. Charlie's our new darling, our darling, our darling. It is, but it's much older than that.
And there was an old Union Army song, a folk song called Johnny is My Darling. a Civil War era piece about Union volunteer soldiers, and it works for our character of Billy in particular. Actually, there are these little jewels that you can find in there if you're hip to Star Trek music from several different scores that I snuck in and out to see, who would catch on.
I can't tell you how much it means to me to be able to, as a musician, incorporate this wonderful element of original music into Star Trek Continues. And more than anything, we want to thank you, the donors and the supporters of Star Trek Continues. Thank you so very much for your generous support and enthusiasm for what we're doing.
So I might sound like Harlan Ellison, who always says things, well, you got to pay the artist. I don't really give it away anymore at this point in my career. However, Star Trek is kind of a different story. This is something that I do because I want to, and the musicians that volunteered to do this are all Trek fans. So it's an example of how Star Trek, 50 years on, is still bringing people together, not just for conventions, but for things like this, a recording session here at Water Music in Hoboken.
We're doing everything we possibly can to make this production as special, as much of an honor and tribute to the original series of Star Trek as we possibly can. And we thank you for being part of that journey.
Control room, are you with us? Okay, so the downbeat of this cue should be time code 090305.